All right, welcome to the Middle School Ethics Bowl Coaching Informational session with the Ethics Institute. This year, we're running the event in person. Finally, we're excited about bringing it back to Kent Place in Summit, New Jersey on February 25th. That's a Saturday from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Right now, registration is closed, so we're happy to announce that there are 14 schools this year competing and 20 teams of students grades 6 through 8. So thank you all for making that happen and bringing ethical discussions into your classrooms and into your schools. And it will be happening in person, and the structure of the rounds as well as the schedule can be found on our website. But briefly, there are 3 rounds, 2 before lunch, 1 after lunch, with 1 finalist round for the top 2 winning teams. We encourage you to plan to stay for the entirety of the event. After round 3, we tend to have a snack. Then we all go and watch round 4, which is the finalist round. And then there's an award ceremony. And we give awards for things like Spirit or the Margot Meyer Dialogue and Ethical Excellence Award. So even if you didn't make it to the finalist competition, your team can still win recognition at the award ceremony. We also think that it's really helpful for the 2 top teams to have an audience because, ethics is a communal endeavor, and you can always learn something from the teams that make it that far to help you improve moving forward.
Can I just add something, Ariel?
Sure.
We are providing lunch, so, and the snacks and the water and all of that. So it's just, I think that the lunchtime is a fun time for the students because they get to interact with the kids from the other school. That always seems to be a favorite time for them.
Mm-hmm. We also this year in person took the structure of having long breaks between rounds. That was true of the virtual competition because we think that it's going to be important for teams to debrief. So we'll have spaces for you to debrief with your teams between rounds, decompress. It's a lot, 15 minutes of intense dialogue with other teams about ethical issues, but it's also an opportunity to intermingle and talk to other schools and other students. I know that for our students, they are so passionate about ethics that it's great to have an opportunity to engage with other students from other schools who are just as passionate about it. So we are trying to provide a lot of opportunities for connection and community building this year. The match structure this year is similar with a few small tweaks from last year, but if you've never done a middle school ethics bowl or you're only familiar with the National High School Ethics Bowl model, this is going to look a little bit different for you. Mainly that there's only 1 case per round. So this was intentional for the age group, middle schoolers, and to allow for us to hit our goals of ensuring that we dive deep into an ethical case and dialogue with one another instead of falling into the structure of debate, which can happen at competition. So the structure will be that we'll have about 5 minutes of introductions where the moderator will lead the judges and the teams getting to know each other. Then we will begin the round with a 2-minute conferral. And then team A is going to present their answer on the case that is assigned for that round and the case question. All teams at this point have a case set, and each case set has the case question at the bottom of each case that will be part of competition. So there's no surprise. Every team will already know what question they're answering. What they won't know until the morning of registration when they pick up their registration packet is which case is assigned to round 1, 2, 3, and 4. So you'll know on the day of, but not prior to that. Team A will present and then team B will present. There's no expectation that team B responds to anything that is said by team A. They're like separate presentations and they will be judged that way. The judges are not going to be scoring on whether team B responds to team A because that's not what part of the presentation is. They'll do that during open dialogue. So students will have an opportunity to confer for a few minutes and then engage in a 10-minute open dialogue between team A and team B. This open dialogue is not moderated. It is the opportunity for team A and team B to show the judges that they can engage in civil discourse with one another by focusing on ethics. And so they're going to need to show that they can navigate how much time and space they take up, whether they can stay focused, and whether they can make progress in understanding the ethical issues of the case. After which there's going to be some conferral time, mainly for the judges, so that they can figure out which questions they're going to ask to what teams and in what order, so that it feels like a more organic conversation. And that will lead us into the judges' question and answer period, which will take 10 minutes, in which the judges will ask questions of team A or team B. This will look different in different rounds with different judges, but the moderator has been instructed to make sure that both team A and team B get roughly 5 minutes of speaking time during the judges' questions, so that the judges can score them equitably in terms of what they are able to reduce during their allotted times. Then there will be a conferral time in which the team A and team B will be thinking about the final question, which is thinking about one idea from the other team that was brought up that influenced their thinking about the ethical issues of the case. And then each team will have 1 minute to share that one idea out loud for the judges to score them. There will be 5 minutes of scoring to make sure that the judges have all their scores figured out, which will then be given to the moderator, who will announce the winner of the round. I want to stop there and see if there are any questions about the structure. We're going to get into the scoring rubric itself, but any questions about how the round itself is structured or running? Yeah, Vidya?
Just a very small question for the open dialogue bit that you said wasn't moderated. Amazing. Will they also have to pay attention to how, when it's been 10 minutes, and stop themselves? Is that part of it?
No, the moderator is going to
Okay.
be timekeeper, but you
Okay.
are, as a team, allowed to bring a stopwatch or have like an analog watch. We don't allow phones, tablets, or computers during the rounds, but if there's a way that you want to keep time for your team on your table, that's fine. But the moderators will also be giving nonverbal warnings, like a knock or a high five, like a hey or a sign, or verbal, depending on what the teams want. Say like you have 2 more minutes or you have 1 more minute. And then generally the protocol is if a student is in like the middle of a sentence, when time is up, they can complete the sentence, as long as it's not a run-on sentence that takes 2 more minutes. Delaney?
For the initial case presentations, are students allowed to have speaker's notes?
Yeah, so we'll get into that during the rule section, but because of the age of middle schoolers and the anxiety that competitions can produce, you will be allowed to have note cards, and we'll get into what those can look like in a few slides. Any other questions about the structure? Okay. Oh, Jason.
Sorry. Aria, I think you said that we'll know in advance of the February 25th date which cases will be used. When is that? And did I hear that correctly?
You'll know on the day of registration what cases are for what round.
Okay, great. Thank you.
The reason why you don't know in advance is we like to have some mystery. And we also think that, a lot of the value of this engagement happens prior to competition. So having a wealth of cases, an opportunity to prep is important. Okay. So competition rules, we'll get into Delaney's questions about note cards. You are allowed 1 note card with you in each round, and it can only be front side, so it can't be double-sided note card. The note card must be 3 by 5, and it should be handwritten, and it shouldn't be in the form of scripts. It should be an outline, bullet points, reminders for the students. So you could have multiple note cards. So it's often the case that our students at Kent Place have a note card for each case. They know which case is in which round, so they'll take that note card with them into that round with that case. Questions about note cards? Okay. Yeah, Jason.
Sorry, I always have the last minute question. Can they bring like a printout of the actual case with them?
Yes, we will be providing printed cases for the rounds themselves, but you have those break times, right? And so bring as many materials, your notes, whatever you want to bring for your time at Kent Place, just knowing that when you're coming into the competition room, you're allowed a pencil. We'll give you scrap paper, and we'll give you a blank case without any notes, and you can have your note card with you. Okay, so you can have, that was a typo, but personal timers on your desks. like I mentioned before. In terms of how many students need to be in the room, like up front and center as part of the competition team, you can have 3 to 5, 3 minimum, 5 maximum. And some of you registered teams of 7, which means that you have 2 kind of backups because it's a long day. Sometimes you need to sub people out, or based on who prepared what case, you might have certain students in certain rounds. And so your 2 alternates can be substituted in between rounds. So whoever shows up for round 2 might be different than who showed up for round 1, but you can't sub in the middle of the round. So if, you know, somebody gets stage fright or somebody isn't feeling well, like, of course they can leave the round, but you can't like put somebody else in their spot. Okay. During the round itself, students can pass notes silently to one another within their team. So they're going to be in a row of desks and they will have blank paper, and so they can write notes so that they can communicate. This is supposed to allow them to start planning and thinking about what they might say and in what order and who's speaking without interrupting the current speaker. So they can do this when their own team is speaking or when the other team is speaking. But we just ask that, you know, if your team is not on for that portion of the round, that you're not speaking when other people are speaking. Are there any questions about note passing? Okay. There's no dress code for the event. However you want to prepare your team to show up for competition, it's not going to influence how the judges score your team. And we will be asking you to send us a list of observers or chaperones. So you can bring more than what you need for chaperones if you know parents or friends or another class, like you have a, you know, a rookie team that's coming up through the ranks that wants to watch your older team or varsity team compete. They can be in the audience, and we'll be asking in advance for a list of how many people you're bringing so that we can make sure that we have the right amount of food to feed you, because this hard mental work makes all of us very hungry. Any questions about audience? So audience, obviously you're not communicating verbally or with signs during the round itself. You're there to listen. Yeah, Laura.
I just want to go back to the 3 to 5 students per team. Maybe I missed, did we already register the exact student names of all the people that we're bringing? I might have missed that. I know we were going to circle back in January for that.
Yeah, if you did, great. If you didn't, we will be asking you for it. And if you did, we'll be confirming the roster because we give award like little certificates of participation. So we want to make sure that we have the students' names correctly spelled.
Great, that sounds good. Should I just email you the names of the people, or maybe I missed a form, or?
No, we'll reach out to you.
Okay, great. That sounds good. Thanks.
Don't worry. Yep. Okay. Okay, so scoring the rounds, parts of the rounds. I'm going to just talk about like the general focus, and then we'll look at the portion of the rubric. So when you're thinking about how to prep your team for their presentation, they have the question. So you want to make sure that they're answering the question that's part of the case and not some variation or the part that they're interested in. They can bring that up during open dialogue, but the presentation needs to be focused on providing a very clear answer to the case. And in doing that, they need to make sure that their answer is grounded in ethics and that it doesn't get stuck in like practical considerations, legal considerations, psychological considerations. You want to make sure that it's centered on ethical issues within that question and how the case helps answer it. And you also want them to make sure that they're considering how other people or how other people will think about the topic. So different perspectives. What might be different answers, what might be the same way of answering it with a similar concept, but disagreeing a little bit. You want them to be able to say, here are all the different ways to think about the issue, and here's where we've landed, even tentatively on this question. So that's the goal of the presentation. Then during open dialogue.
Ariel, can I just interrupt for a second? But we're not looking for them to be, you know, talking about different philosophical frameworks or using formal ethical language, like, you know, a deontological perspective or anything like that. So when you're talking about focus on ethics, you're talking about focusing on ethical perspectives, not necessarily ethical framework.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So they can throw around concepts or values. If they throw around philosophical terminology, there is an expectation that they are able to explain that. And that's part of what's captured in respectful dialogue too, is that like, it's not respectful to engage in a conversation where the language you're using is making it so that the other team can engage with you, right? Yeah, Tracy.
Sorry. So my students, we're a Catholic school, and my students wanted to know if the value that informed their decision was related to their faith perspective. Could they respectfully say that one of the values that informs me is my belief in the dignity of the human person? Is that acceptable?
Of course.
Okay, so they can use religious language as long as they identify it as such.
Yes. And I would say in that instance, it's also an ethical value that's not unique to religion.
Right. That's what I'm trying to help them to come to terms with. Thank you.
So they might want to explain what like dignity means to them, right? You
Yes,
know, defining that, unpacking that a little bit.
Okay, thank you.
So during open dialogue, the two teams are going to try to dig further into the ideas presented in the case, but also in their presentations. So it's going to be really important that they're building on the ideas of the other team and keeping the conversation going by asking questions, but also answering questions. And it shouldn't feel like an interrogation or an interview. Like the questions should be natural in the sense that it's progressing the consideration of whatever topic that they're talking about related to the case. So if two teams disagree about the answer, the dialogue might be thinking about like learning more about why the other team presented a certain way and asking them if they had considered a perspective that the other team had thought was more important. If the two teams agree on a case and they actually have the same answer, it might be thinking about those alternative perspectives a bit more, or seeing ways in which they agree on the final answer, but might disagree on the process of getting to the final answer, or thinking about related examples that can help propel their answer to the case question. The judge's question part will be judged based on whether or not the team itself answers the question. And so this can be tricky because not all questions are clear questions, even with well-intentioned adults. So I encourage you to help your students think through strategies for asking for clarity if the question isn't clear in the first place, so that they can make sure that they're answering it. And that in answering it, that they're addressing the ethical dimensions of that question. And so if a question is asked that has to do with practicality, making sure that they somehow link it back to the key ethical values, concepts, frameworks, processes of thinking that they've been using. For the final question here, we want to make sure that this competition is one in which it's dialogical and supports the growth of ideas and acknowledges that people can change their mind over time or when presented with new ideas of others. So the final question is an opportunity for a team to demonstrate that they've been actively listening to the other team and haven't just entered the competition to say what they think and leave. And so they're going to be focusing on one point from the other team and then explaining how it impacts their thinking. It impacts their thinking because they hadn't considered it a particular way. It could impact their thinking because now they actually aren't sure about their original idea and they might be changing their mind. It doesn't matter how it impacts, but they have to explain what it is that impacted their thinking, even just briefly. And then the respectful dialogue is the judging of the whole round itself. So judges are going to be looking for our students dialoguing in a way that's civil and respectful, where they're demonstrating open-mindedness and curiosity about the topic and the ideas presented by the other team, especially when the other team disagrees with them. Can they do that respectfully? Can they take turns? And are they actively listening? So are they giving verbal and nonverbal clues that show that they're actually engaged in what we're engaged in as two teams in conversation, and not just there to win it and leave it.
So if I can add something to that, when you said, Ariel, about even in the final question, they may say something like, they changed their original opinion. And I think that that's really important because this is not a debate. And it's not about them, you know, defending their ethical perspective as opposed to the other teams. The idea is really to, you know, advance and increase understanding, or actually getting the other team to think in a way that maybe they didn't think about before. So that's not a minus, that's actually a plus. So that's this whole idea around, you know, open and respectful dialogue, that we're really talking about the case in a way that's not defensive, like this is the right ethical perspective. It's, you know, well, we didn't think about that, or did you consider blah, blah, blah. So I, you know, that's the danger, because we don't want it ever to become a debate. It is really more of a dialogue. And how many different ways can we think about the question? And how many ways does your, you know, school, your kids bring to think about that question? And are they open-minded enough to be able to think differently?
Great. So related to those components, the score sheet is out of 40 with 10 points for presentation, dialogue, and questions, and 5 points for the final question and the respectful dialogue. So what is not going to count for or against you in terms of scoring points is how often or who speaks in your team. So the judges aren't looking to make sure if you have a team of 5 that every single person speaks, or that, you know, there's only, or versus one person speaks. It doesn't matter. What does matter is like whether it feels like people are being respectful and engaged, right? So if people aren't speaking because they're disengaged, you might lose some points for your respectful dialogue. But if they're engaged and for whatever reason, it's because of how you prepped, they don't speak, that's your choice as a team. Your teams don't ever need to defend a particular position. So Karen just covered this, and it's okay if over time, even during open dialogue, they change their mind on their answer. And they will not be deducted points for perceived inconsistencies. And then, of course, the verbal and nonverbal is going to influence specifically how judges score respectful dialogue. So make sure you talk about that with your students. Questions about scoring? Okay. So we're gonna end with some tips, and then we'll have open forum for other questions. Things that we have learned by both running events and coaching events is that it's good to prep with your students ahead of time how they're going to navigate who will talk next within their team. So how are they going to pass it off to one another during a presentation or open dialogue or questions, instead of like everybody talking all at once and it being a little awkward, like, oh no, you go first, whatever. But also, how are they going to navigate talking to the other team specifically during open dialogue? So if another team is taking up a lot of time, how are they going to like try to actively integrate into that conversation? How are they going to be mindful of the ways in which they're taking up a lot of space and giving the other team time to talk during open dialogue? You're going to want to think about what you're going to say during the open dialogue. So again, you don't want to rely too heavily on just a barrage of questions. That's not going to score well on the for the competition, because it's not super respectful. But you also don't want to be stuck on the other end of that, which is like you're always just answering the other team's questions. So how can you ask questions, but also what are ways in which we can engage in dialogue by offering new ideas, going back to the original case to cite evidence or give examples. Personal experiences are also fine to use during open dialogue and presentation. You're going to want to think about the ways in which your teams prepare their note cards so that they're most useful to them. You're going to want to talk about respectful engagement. So how our nonverbal and verbal cues can communicate whether we're engaged with a conversation, especially when we disagree with someone or we don't understand someone. And you're going to want to talk to them about avoiding repetition within the team. So this can happen a lot in judges' questions, where one teammate will answer a judge's question and another teammate will kind of say the same thing as they continue to try to explain. And that takes up time, which then limits the ability for a judge to ask another question of that team, you can then demonstrate more understanding of the ethical issues of the case. But you also want to avoid repetition during open dialogue where you don't want team A to say one thing and then team B, you're just parroting or mirroring what team A says. You want to make sure that you're enhancing the conversation, not just repeating. You're going to want to think about how we can move past memorization. This isn't like a speech competition or a debate. Really, we're trying to demonstrate our ability for our students to think ethically in real time in dialogue with other people. And then what they're going to do when somebody disagrees strongly with an idea that they presented. How can we navigate defensiveness or like an attachment to a particular idea that we feel strongly about when somebody doesn't understand it or isn't sure about whether it's true or they don't see it as the right answer for themselves. And then you're going to want to work on thinking about how you can build on ideas. So this will be specifically important during the dialogue. So if somebody offers an idea, how can you, instead of changing the topic and focusing on another idea, how can you take that idea and add something? And then here's some tips on like how you can help prep your students in asking questions for the dialogue. So we spend a lot of time at Kent Place helping our students think through how to formulate a good ethical question, especially on the spot after hearing the ideas of others. So it's really important. We found that students know and understand the case inside and out and can cite examples from the case and connect it to their personal lives, that they can think about asking questions that extend the argument. So they test the implications. So if a team says yes, because of this, then you can ask, like, is that always the case? Would that exist in a similar type of situation with a little tweak to the context? You can ask questions about what's possible, like other possibilities or other perspectives. So if it seems like we're both agreeing, then it's a great opportunity to ask a question about how we could disagree or have different ideas on the right answer. So if we all think that the answer has to do with human dignity, then like what's another concept or value or way of thinking to answer the case? You can think about asking questions from different stakeholder perspectives. So in some cases, they might be privileging a student's perspective and what they want in a case. And you could ask questions about like, well, what would parents want? What would educators want? You can ask them to think about applying ethical concepts and theories if you teach those things or religious things. And then always making sure that you can ask questions that anchor the group back to the main case and the case question. So during an open dialogue, you know, it kind of blooms. And if your group is feeling like it's going off topic and we've lost the ethics of things, they can bring back the case and be like, well, what does that really mean for this question in the case? And then they read the case question again and kind of recenter the group, kind of like a facilitative question. And then if somebody asks a question and the team doesn't answer, you can always circle back to another question, or, you know, maybe your note cards have some pre-questions that you think might be helpful for spurring dialogue that they can circle back to on their own. So that's all I have in terms of tips for helping coaching your students through the content of the different parts of the round itself. But I'd like to open it up to other questions that any of you might have. Yeah, video.
Do you have any video recordings of middle schoolers? I mean, it doesn't have to be like a match, but, you know, of having ethical conversations, a good example of dialogue.
Yeah, so this is the perennial question, which we are always like, yes, we're going to do that. And then logistically, it doesn't happen. So we would love to make videos next year. And if you are interested in helping make that happen, we would welcome it. The reason why we haven't recorded just our students doing it is because we don't want to give the impression that there's only one way of analyzing a case, and Kent Place has a very specific brand of analyzing a case. So if we did a recording, we would want to do it as like a pseudo match between two teams, or it would be a recording of us and then a recording of your students. So if that's something you're interested in helping us build out as a resource, please send me an email. But in terms of like getting a sense of what people do, you should have gotten an email this week about scrimmages. So that would be a great way to kind of get a sense of like how your team's doing, how other teams are doing things. So I'd encourage you to take that opportunity. Other questions? Yeah, Tracy. You're muted.
Sorry, I always forget that. So one of my parents is going to be, if I understand correctly, I have 8 students, so that means I have 2 teams, right? So during round 1, both of my teams will be, okay. So I have a parent who is going to be with one team and I'll be with one team. And she wanted to know, can she use her phone to record it? And I'm thinking the answer is no, since we're not consenting. Okay, just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
I mean, if she wants to record it so she can show off her kids, just have those people come and watch firsthand. But it could also be that, you know, she wants to be able to record it so that you can listen to it because you can't be in 2 places at once, which, yeah.
That was kind of what she was thinking. I think she also just wanted to video her son. So I don't think it was anything other than that.
She could take copious notes for
Yes.
you. You'll have time to debrief between rounds.
Okay, that's great. Actually, thank you very much for that. I think that will be very helpful.
So I think I overlooked saying this, but you do need a chaperone in each round that you are competing in. So if you have 2 teams, you need 2 chaperones. So you as a coach, and then if you don't have like a secondary coach, then a parent or another teacher would be helpful. Yeah, video.
I may have missed this and didn't look for it on the website, but just want to throw it out there. If I know people who would judge, are you still looking for
Yes.
judges? And is that information on the
Yeah,
the class
decision
management
form
system?
is on just our regular ethics@kentplace.org website.
Okay.
But I will make a note to send you the volunteer. I'll send it to all of you, volunteer sign up. So we need judges, but we also, like, you know, if you have somebody who wants to be there and wants to participate in helping the event run, but doesn't feel comfortable judging, we have moderating, which is like a really important, like the rounds wouldn't work without moderators, and we need moderators who feel strong enough in their public speaking that they can interrupt people and enforce rules. So if you know somebody at your school or in your life that would like to do that, please send them our way. Okay, so I guess the other thing in terms of judging is that judges will have the opportunity to write like comments and feedback in their scoring rubrics, and we will be photocopying them and giving them to you as coaches, but they're not going to be providing feedback in real time to your teams. One, because we don't want any sense of like favoritism. You know, if one team goes over and says, that was the best thing I've ever heard, like that doesn't feel good to the other team. But we also don't want any like critical feedback to cause your team to second guess or self-doubt or overcorrect, because just because the judge says that you should have done X doesn't mean that that judge is correct in their feedback, right? And so it's better to get a holistic sense of the different feedbacks from the different judges that can help inform next year's competition. Okay. Well, if you do have any lingering questions, feel free to email us at ethics@kentplace, and I will make sure to send this recording so you can review it if you would like, as well as the volunteer sign-up sheet. All right, we look forward to seeing you all in February. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.